ready? Both of these arguments are fundamentally non-starters. The entire 1NC was about whiteness. It's about how white liberal subjects economize suffering and deploy it in favor of a national culture. That was entirely explained by the 2NC. All of our arguments are about how whiteness receives particular narratives and representation of suffering and incorporates them within a broader liberal narrative, which is why none of this argument makes any sense. The racial comfort is the opposite of what we're doing. I don't think that the conclusions that we reach about the status of the liberal subject is entirely comfortable. It can have been comfortable in the 2NC for you to hear that you are an inherently violent subject, that your ballot, casting your ballot for the affirmative will do violence. That is not a comfortable statement. That is not one that is easy to accept. Precisely our argument is that this kind of sort of white, this sort of endemic white liberal racism that needs to be made clear, which is exactly what their argument is. Now, the Yancey argument also does make sense. We are not a view from nowhere. We were talking about whiteness the entire time. We were talking about the ways in which the space of debate necessarily operationalizes that whiteness in favor of particular kinds of narratives, in favor of the endorsement as a palliative to help paper over the sort of structural imperialism that goes on all the time. This is a form of resentment. Their invocation of the Yancey argument relies on a particular hermeneutic of suspicion that totalizes whiteness and forces a confession of privilege. The idea that we have to specifically talk about ourselves and that we can't talk about the white liberal subject that's specifically different, insists that the game is being rigged and destroys the ability to accurately conceptualize identity construction as well, ignoring the other modes of repression, causing backlash and emotion. Gender hermeneutic of suspicion is predicated on revealing the social dynamics of the white plot by tying together events into a cause-effect relationship by invoking whiteness. Components explain what was not understood, histories, biographies, and ruminations reveal other manifestations of whiteness, and fight the fact that whites don't recognize whiteness as a function of its power, secures itself by refusing to identify itself. The hermeneutic of suspicion is self-confirming. Belief system denying that whiteness is omnipresent is proof that whiteness is omnipresent to retract as evidence to observe that some whites are materially worse off than non-whites is a rhetorical move. The hermeneutic of suspicion is skeptical of the dominant discourse I marked there, and
at the bottom, the last
emphasize? Sure. All right. And continuing as emphasizing the unifying interest of dominance rhetoric is how boundaries of racial categories are negotiated, largely ignoring the interaction between race, class, and sex, and the struggles of many whites to acquire privileges, reifying race surveillance to capture the process through which it exerts a structuring effect by suppressing intra-group division, whiteness studies, so perpetuates an up-then view of difference. The ramification of racial categories adaptable to the cost potential predictability implies that all persons classified as white will exhibit undesirable traits, being white as a condition in need of corrective attention. Whiteness studies cause the racism, monocausal, other forces are relocated. Wilson's warnings of disadvantages. Whites either actively resist or they perpetuate existing inequalities. This allows for the subsequent argument that whiteness is a source of oppression, is eradicated, justice will emerge. Once whiteness is demonized, whites have no choice but to view themselves ironically in the context of a deficit model. Whites are required to renounce their whiteness but celebrate alternatives that inevitably result in anger and bafflement. I think this is particularly clear in the cross-text when they say that when they say I'm basically white, I'm becoming white, I am assimilating into the structure of whiteness. Why? Because I get to claim the privileges of whiteness. I don't think that's accurate. Is it really true that because I'm Asian, because I would go to Harvard, because I have certain kinds of privilege, I'm no longer race? I am basically the same as a white person because I'm not as dark as they are. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. It ignores particular forms of racial oppression that particular groups like Latin Americans and Latino Americans and Asian Americans, in particular, structure like nativist conceptions. Nobody ever assumed that they didn't speak the English language, but people assume that of me all the time. Their resentment argument is the resentment impact about the judge is particularly salient in this case. Here the argument is not that they have resentment or they inculcate a sense of resentment in themselves and say, you, Joe, when voting for the affirmative, create a sense of resentment against itself that inevitably results in a backlash and inevitable liberal violence. That is our argument. Also, resentment denies the possibility of anti-colonial struggle. Freedom resentment is a reactive force which locks in the colonial objects and honoring cycle of manipulative violence. What's going on? All right. Compliment 95. Autobiography is a lucrative commodity. Reformers transforms itself into a valuable intellectual act, so we must be skeptical of the assertion that outside of publication records sufficient evidence that suggests that there never was. Autobiography may be momentous for the individual author. This has a limited effect on culture. This transformation of the outside from outsider authors into successors subverts the outsider's racial radical intention by constituting them exemplary participants within contemporary culture. This does for outsiders who are less fortunate. Storytellers do not reflect on the meaning of their success nor to take a move cultural values they claim to resist. Those who participate in autobiographical discourse speak not in a different voice but in a common voice to reflect their culture devoted to liberal values. Writing about oneself recognize the belief in autonomous individuals. Autobiographical discourse is co-opted an instrument for social reform envisioned by the outsiders by affirming the myths of individual success. Autobiography reproduces political, economic, social, and psychological structures that attend to such success. Autobiographies deflect attention from collective social responsibility toward collective solutions. The eradication of racist harms, although the authors oppose individualism, liberal individualism, autobiographical discourse will have a significant effect on the self she produces. Autobiographical discourse overrides radical authorial intention, even when the autobiographer self-conscious consciously determines to resist liberal ideology, the relentless individualism of genre, subordinates her political critique, defining her own subjectivity. She reproduces herself as the character in which whom culture is already well acquainted. Marxism well acquainted. The insistence on a particular form of whiteness that is totalizing and homogenizing everything is the insistence that we know where a view from nowhere. The idea that they can identify whiteness, the idea that they can identify a view from nowhere is particularly the operationalization of whiteness. Giant 13, the black white paradigm that dominates racial discourse inhibits our comprehension of varieties of ways of racism, racial identities. Latinos and Asian Americans have become victims of nativist argument, theorizing race strictly through the black white paradigm is disadvantage for all people of color. Neither is descriptive nor prescriptive. Reach to address the complexity of racial identities. Adequately, the paradigm disempowered various racial groups historically ignores marginalized Asian Americans, resulting in weakened analysis of their minds of effective the development of effective political solutions, eliminating specificities. Also, they talked about statistics that is also a link to argument. Is reading suffering dysfunctionalizes sensation, reduces the value of human life to its ability to be calculated. Boston 10 quantifications fail in the case of immense suffering. Other forms of translation tests have to kick in the regime of value suffering endemic to liberalism, which does not lead the sphere of this ready-made suffering on touch. Arbitrary values placed on various sufferings out here in the realm of grand disasters are very definition finding thresholds that implaude liberal discourse.
I have you with 637.